Hi, this is Mike with the newly started Red Stapler podcast. Obviously, the Red Stapler comes from one of my favorite movies, Office Space, and kind of one of the main characters. He constantly is kind of getting stepped on by the corporation. He has a favorite red stapler, and throughout the whole movie, he's a side character, but he gets shafted over and over and over through a series of events, leading to him working in the basement and finally having his stapler taken away before he burns the corporation down. Not condoning any of that sort of thing, but I thought it was a fun title for the podcast. So I have done a podcast in the past on how to get ahead financially, doing stocks, stuff like that. Really been looking for my voice and just kind of what to speak to. I have so many thoughts on things, and I actually have an art account called catgbt.art. You can go on Instagram and follow me, where if you ever followed people, I try to document in a similar way, just kind of the changes through society, especially since COVID. I plan on doing a book at some point, like an art coffee table book, but called America Postmortem. And I think I incorporate a lot of my humor. I even try to do some stand-up every now and then. But I incorporate a lot of my humor and kind of like dark dystopian view of kind of how society's going. Kind of George Carlin kind of style, maybe Tim Dillon, that sort of thing. But yeah, this podcast, I hope to incorporate some of my humor, life experience, and just viewpoints on where I think things are going, and maybe we can troubleshoot some solutions. I find myself, like many people, very overwhelmed by kind of everything that's going on now in the world. I'm constantly trying to find some perspective on it, kind of bouncing between just complete nihilism and some hope and some despair, and but I'm naturally somebody who wants to find solutions, and worst comes to worst, I feel like there's ways to profit without sacrificing your morals and things like that, or at least like sustain your purchasing power, despite inflation and some of these crazy things that are going on. But yeah, I wanted to do kind of an overview of kind of what this channel is going to focus on, just to kind of hold myself accountable to kind of what I want to talk about. As far as like my background, I just wanted to kind of state like why I might have some unique experience and insights into what I'm talking about. I mean, I kind of grew up in like a middle class, because suburban area of around Charlotte, North Carolina, kind of outlying areas, and was raised very conservative, Southern Baptist. Got into ADHD. I deal with some bipolar. I didn't realize that till later on in life. So just kind of a lot of kind of issues that a lot of people I think can relate to, from a young age, bullying, things like that. I'm 37 years old, just to put things in context. So I've seen a lot of changes. I grew up kind of before, like with the early internet, and didn't really grow up with a phone in my hands. Had a flip phone through high school. So kind of had this like exposure to technology, almost like a hopeful view of it early on. And I grew up with like Nintendo 64, Game Boys, things like that were very exciting and fun. And the early internet was a lot of fun. And then I think it really took a dark turn more around like 2010 was when social media really started taking hold so much, and a lot of the things that I think have really led to rise in like suicides and depression and just body dysmorphia. It just trying to one up each other all on these things. At the same time, obviously I can do this and put this on YouTube, and there's some really great things. So it's just that I don't feel. I think technology can be a very good thing, especially like I'm more into the decentralization and kind of. I love YouTube because everybody, like, I'd much rather watch that than something that's spoon fed to me on like Netflix or something like that. I think technology designed right is great. I just don't think the right incentives. There's like a saying that show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome. And I feel like we have been very manipulated with, like, everything's just been geared towards making money, accruing power to like a very few. If technology was designed in a different way, I believe there would be much different outcomes and we could actually be much happier. I'm not a believer in like tech utopia or any of this crap, but I think if we focused a lot more on decentralization and empowering like individuals, like we could have a lot better outcomes and have lots of technology. So this isn't just slamming technology, it's more the way it's being used. That being said, just kind of wanted to go over like what I plan on talking about. So I wrote down a lot of themes that I want to cover, and one of the biggest things that's bothered me is I went to Appalachian State in the mountains, and I loved it. I love the natural beauty there. And the biggest thing that got me into what I ended up studying, I started out doing art. I still love art, and just decided not to make a living off of that unless it just naturally happened. But the biggest thing that got me into renewable energy, which is what I ended up studying, was just the desire for sustainability, changing the way that humans live off this planet, and kind of going back to more of like the light footprint that we had, pre-industrial. Like, I'm definitely fascinated with like ancient civilizations and just like what they were able to do. I say permaculture. I love like the concept of really being able to sustainably grow crops, make energy, and live off the land long term without completely degrading it. And I obviously there were civilizations that collapsed because they didn't do that. But I think ancient peoples really like lived in more of a balance with nature, as animals have to do, or they died. So like I think kind of like Darwinism or survival forced them to do that more, and we have gotten so out of balance with that. So I got really into renewable energy and sustainable agriculture, all that kind of stuff, and found, to my dismay, I got into doing utility scale solar, residential solar, a lot of this stuff. But after I graduated and I was so optimistic about getting into that, and I'm seeing all these solar fields go up, and a lot of focus on energy efficiency that was pushed for a while. The two most energy intensive industries were created that don't really seem to be doing anything. Yeah, I'm sure, like, except maybe like very dystopian things, like a surveillance state. And of course I'm talking about AI. That uses an insane amount of energy. Crypto also. The mining of crypto. I've dabbled in it, been interested. I think there is potential with that infrastructure. Like, it has a good concept. I'm still into like, I actually think precious metals, and maybe if we could put that precious metals onto like the blockchain or something like that, I think that's the long-term solution. I don't think really Bitcoin in itself has inherent value. Like, I want to be attached to something more tangible, but obviously there's the movement of moving gold and heavy metals around easily. For transactions, it's not easy. So I'm sure that there's got to be a solution to moving them around through the blockchain, and I think there's already companies working with that, like Tether. Um, but just some of these industries are just using so much energy, and really, I feel like we're even if we're powering some of it off solar, it's really just destroying the environment so fast. Um, it's like, even if they're using lots of solar, that's not like what I wanted to learn about that industry for. Um, it's very upsetting to see that's, uh, for example, I'm working at a data center right now, actually. I'm not going to say which one, but I do soil and concrete testing. And there's a big solar field. They locate these things next to substations and existing solar fields. Here in North Carolina, there was a ton of solar built out for all these data centers, for Apple and who knows who else. We actually have a lot of that stuff coming here, which is putting us probably in the forefront of this, what I think in the next election will be a huge issue, which is the data center battle. And these things are using so much electricity, so much power, and I don't want to participate in that infrastructure. I mean, I'm seeing, they say it creates some jobs. I see, there's tons of people working right now building this thing, but once it's up and running, it's not going to take many people to run this. So, that's one of the themes I want to talk about. And but yeah, just the big highlight was that I feel like ever since I studied this, there was already this awareness that energy was a huge problem. Like, it's going to run out at some point, unless we discover like fusion or some other novel type of electricity or way to make power. Oil's being tapped out at increasing rates. Natural gas will eventually run out. Even uranium will run out. And all that stuff takes oil to get it out of the ground as well. But yeah, some of the themes that I want to focus on in this podcast, because this is an intro, and sorry if I'm talking a little fast. But I think this will be a good format, me just kind of talking, because I'm always like, I got to be like sitting at a desk with a podcast mic or something like that, and it just never gets done. So I think me just talking on my phone and being real with y'all, I think that's the biggest thing I have to bring is my real world experience. And some of the things that I wrote down to highlight and focus on going forward is themes around AI, outsourcing, how we've sent so many jobs abroad, and then the mass migration that we've had coming in here, and that can lead into things like H-1B. You're having massive communities reshaped, and a lot of these companies have just found every single workaround, from bringing women into the workplace. Not saying that's a bad thing, but I think that's debatable, is like how the effect that's had. Obviously you had a quick doubling of the labor force, and then outsourcing things in the 90s, like physical labor to like countries like China. Now you're having outsourcing of service jobs, which was one of the few bastions we had of jobs still left. But you've hollowed out whole areas, and then now there's all these ways to bring people in and have them as student visas or H-1Bs, and none of these things do I hate. I've dated a few people on H-1Bs, but then you have some of the effects that feminism's had. Obviously it's had some good things. I think there's been a lot of bad things though, and you know what, like, I want to discuss that in a mature, real way. Just to acknowledge, something can have good intentions and it can have bad outcomes. So I think there has been some really bad outcomes that are detrimental to society for that. I know that's a touchy subject. DEI, I think that's had a lot of bad outcomes. I'm not saying it had bad intentions, but left versus right falsehoods. You're pretty much getting the same thing whichever way you vote. All these people are bought and paid for. Surveillance state. I think a lot of these data centers are very related to that. You've had a rise of a lot of really questionable companies, Palantir definitely being one, and it tech's involvement in a lot of this stuff, which is very unsettling. We've got demographic trends as the population's fallen off, and very few parts of the world still have increasing populations, or even stable populations at that. And there's going to be a lot of big downstream effects from demographic changes, and it's going to be very disruptive to governments, structures that have held societies together. I would say destruction of family, community, and spirituality. And you can argue, like, obviously people have different beliefs and stuff, but there were certain fundamental things that really held us together, held our societies together. I don't think anybody could argue that the destruction of community has been I think that and family, you can't argue that those haven't been super detrimental. But I think we have a spiritual element too as well, and just kind of the movement to just being so science-based, completely agnostic, and just acknowledging that there's things bigger than ourselves is really, I've got my beliefs and I could talk about those at points, but just kind of this post-modernity, nihilistic, we've replaced spirituality really with materialism, and I don't think anybody would really, if they do a deep dive, think that that's a good thing. Transhumanism is something that's really bizarre and troubling to me. Can go into that more. Moral decay, obviously subjective, but we can really dive into that. Gender dynamics and the division that's, I think, been very much structured. I think some of it's been unintentional, and some of it's been very intentional, to divide and conquer. Wokeness, health, that's food, exercise, just mental health, like all the things that are under that, and how to, I'll probably focus more on men just because I'm a man, and I really think men have been targeted in much of this, to degrade us and depress our spirits, and there's just been a lot of I can speak for myself, like just growing up and what I was taught and how far certain directions I went, and how I've had to uncondition myself from a lot of things that I just thought were true because that's the way I'd been taught so much in schools. And I can even see it in my girlfriend's kids, in what they're being exposed to. So I think a lot of these issues will speak to women too, and I hope there's women that are receptive to hearing some of these things, and obviously this can be for women as well, and I hope they earnestly want to understand where men are coming from on things, because yes, there's some very bad male actors out there, putting some toxic things out. There's lots of women doing the same thing, and I don't think that's useful. But I think we have to be realistic about the terrible conversations that are going on, and realistic about the things that both genders are facing. I think inflation is a huge issue that we can really delve into, and how to profit off of that, and find a way to make some money, because I don't think you just have to accept inflation. Obviously, I don't want to be making money off of it. I'd rather there not be inflation. But there is, and I think one of the most reliable things is that government programs won't be cut, and that they will just keep printing money, and we're also running out of resources. And I think there's a big play and way to, I'm a big believer in not just sitting there and complaining about something, but there's ways that we can take advantage of these things and set ourselves up for success, and either making money or at least not losing a bunch of money, and keeping our purchasing power, which I think is huge. Then there's I want to explore agriculture. Like, everybody just kind of wants to go back to like people talk like, I want to go back to the 50s or when there was just farmers. But honestly, I think that's a false narrative, because I think even like the beginnings of agriculture were starting to enslave us, and make us think that was normal. And like, sometimes I feel like we look back to times that weren't even like natural or great either. So like, why should we yearn for working on a big monocropping farm or working in a factory when jobs were still here or something, when those in themselves are like, I feel, looking for the word, just kind of bad distortions of what I feel like humans could and should be doing on this planet. We used to have, I don't want our jobs to go away, but I also don't want us, I think we're set, like, we have a lot more potential than working 9 to 5 days a week. Say we didn't have any of this AI or any of that in a factory, or having to farm like crazy for a lot of our money to be taxed, and like a lot of the problems that people had back then too. Like a lot of foragers and people before the agricultural revolution and industrial revolution, they had a lot more free time, and obviously they had their own source of problems. But I don't understand. I think we're being given like false choices of what the potential could be, and I think we should develop new systems that offer us a lot better standard of living, especially with things that should make our lives easier and don't. Unions, I think that's something to talk about. And then I've been fascinated with some of the stuff that's merged out of Asia and China, with like the lie flat, buy lawn, let it rot movements. I think those are interesting. We can explore those more. And just kind of how this is a global phenomenon of people pulling back or letting the system go and just not wanting to be a part of it, or just kind of quiet quitting. That's kind of the American equivalent right now. And kind of the differences between how millennials are pulling out of the workforce, which is they're more doing that kind of just checking out mentally. And then I think Gen Z is doing the more let it rot version, whereas they're just not even choosing to participate if they can afford to do it. I think things like hubris of the elites, we see this huge chasm between the have and have-nots, the middle class vanishing increasingly, and these elites just doing more and more bizarre things that they're, things like the Epstein Island, the projects to live forever, you name it. Like they're into some weird stuff. They're in the transhumanism movement, and they just don't talk like normal people talk. It's I think there's just such a perversion that happens when you get that wealthy, and you cease to deal with like real problems and interact with like real people. That's like, you're either looking for these weird novel experiences, or you are trying to solve problems that no one even thinks about in normal life, or you're just doing psychotic stuff. I don't know, sociopathic stuff. I don't even understand some of the stuff that some of these people are pushing. But I'd like to explore it for sure. It does fascinate me. Um, obviously, how to make money off the collapse. I don't want to just complain and talk about the bad things that there are out there, but how to prepare, how to find happiness as a man or a person that doesn't subscribe to kind of the BS we're being fed. How to opt out of the system and seek things like decentralization, co-ops, collective land ownership. Maybe we can, do things like Kickstarter and pull money together to own land and create small communities and that are self-funding and create a better quality of life somehow within this weird structure, with whatever the structure will permit, or with our resistance. So that's a pretty long list, I know, that I rattled off of things that I want to cover. Probably not the most likely to get a shit ton of clicks, just from being catchy, but I want to be substantive, and hopefully, I'll try to do really exciting things going forward, to focus on. I might have to, go to kind of making things a little more entertaining, but I hope there's still people, I still trust that there's people out there that just want knowledgeable information. I don't know everything, but I'll speak to the best of my ability, and I'll try to research things that I talk about and be open to being presented with alternative information. So thank you for listening, and I will try to keep posting some videos out here while I'm on the job sites, when I got some free time, or there's always times I'm just kind of sitting around, doing something. So I definitely have time to talk and present some information and hopefully entertain you guys. But yeah, follow me on my art channel, catgpt.art on Instagram, if you want to see my creative, kind of funny side. And I'll try to bring some more, some humor and some more personality to future podcasts. Look forward to talking with you later. Bye.